What's up, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's happening with SPY, Tesla, and the overall markets. I'm going to break down why tomorrow is going to be a very crazy day as we have the big bank earnings coming out, not to mention more economic data, such as our PPI report. I'm going to break down what President Trump just said by reading his quotes about China, as he's saying there could be a deal coming. And he did give us an update about his tariffs. Just know that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I'm saying as financial advice. Anyways, as far as SPY is going, as you guys can tell, we've been making lower highs so far as we were due for a bit of a cool off. I did mention to you all I was expecting us to dip a little bit to start things off, but I said to watch to see if it could hold some key supports. So I want to see if SPY could hold 525, which is this previous resistance becoming support. We ended up failing there, so the next target we had was around that like 515 area, then 510 if that failed. We came all the way down to about 509.7, very close to 510, and that's where buyers started to defend. So the question is, can buyers push us higher, or do we get a massive rug pull? I'll give you guys more details about these charts very, very soon. Keep in mind the QQQ has an almost identical setup. So does ES. So does NQ, Tesla. The majority of these tickers have very similar setups, even Tesla. So what's going to happen? I'll talk more about this very soon. Let's first talk about some news and such. So the entire market was bloody red, which is not really a surprise. When SPY is up 10%, the QQQ is up 12%, Tesla's up 22%. Seeing a pullback the next day would not be too much of a surprise. I did predict we'd see a bit of a pullback, and I said to watch to see if we could get that bounce. So far, we did see a small bounce, but we weren't able to actually reclaim the highs yet, and we'll have to see if we could do that later on or not. Now, involving President Trump, keep in mind that what helped the market pump really hard yesterday was the fact that he announced he wanted to pause the majority of his reciprocal tariffs, except for those for China. So keep that in mind. He mentioned that a lot of people were jumping out of line and that he wanted to back down on the reciprocal tariffs for 90 days. So it's just a temporary delay. And he said, this is his quote, that people were getting very, very yippy and no other president would do what he has done as a result. He said he used his instincts to make this move. Then President Trump said something that caused the market to dip. President Trump has announced that the tariffs on China are now at least 145%, higher than previously claimed. So before they were saying 125%, now they're saying 145%. They gave further clarity about that. So that's huge news. With that happening, this did cause the market to actually sell off a little bit more. That's why we saw a bit of a sell-off today. And that's part of why we saw more volatility. So going back to President Trump, I want to mention that we had some quotes from him from today as well. President Trump mentioned that we would use the money from tariffs to pay down debt. The first deal on tariffs is very close, not considering exemptions now. And we're looking at the EU one block in trade discussions. US steel is going to be doing very well because of tariffs, and I'm not looking to hurt Mexico. I don't know why US steel even needs a deal. That's what President Trump said. Then he went on to say that I think there's going to be a good deal between the US and China. He said that I think we will end up working out something good for both nations. I would love to be able to work a deal with China. That's what President Trump said again. And then he also went on about how he's working with lots of different nations and that there's going to be a transition of problems, but in the end, there's going to be an incredible thing that comes from this. So there's going to be transition costs and transition problems, but it's going to be worth it. So he's implying that, with all these deals that are coming into place, there's going to be a big transition in the economy. He did mention there's going to be more costs coming. So he is implying that, there could be some pain. He did imply that, but he also said previously he does not think there's going to be a recession and the US is going to be fine nonetheless. So keep that in mind as well. So that's what President Trump basically said today. He didn't talk as much about the tariffs, but I do have his quotes for you guys. But with that being said, what else is going on? We had a very, very important Fed speaker today known as Goolsbee. So that's the Fed speaker of the day. He mentioned that as far as the US is going, it's very important to listen to see what happens to this data, watch it very, very carefully, and we could get further cuts if we get good data. We need the economy to bounce back in order for this to happen. He mentioned the Fed's going to continue to monitor inflation and such, and as of right now, they're going to be very patient. So as of right now, the Fed's plan is to keep rates the same, but things could change depending on the economic data that comes out. And he mentioned that if the tariffs are truly delayed, that could be better for the US economy for the shorter term when it comes to like inflationary projections and such. So he says there might be less pain and that could actually incentivize more potential cuts. But it's not a strong possibility yet. It's just a slight possibility because they're waiting to see what happens with the data first. And as of right now, the main goal is just to keep rates the same for the time being. So that's what he basically said for today. But if anything, he remains optimistic about the way things are looking. Now, why is tomorrow going to be a crazy day? Okay. Tomorrow is going to be Friday, April 11th, 2025. It's going to be very important for two main reasons. Number one, we have lots of economic data coming out. At 8:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, we have the PPI data report coming out. Now, keep in mind, CPI came out today and all the numbers were basically below expectations for the month of March. All the CPI numbers, you guys can see them right here, the top four lines. Everything was below expectations, which is quite good. So there's a good chance PPI should be decent for tomorrow, in my opinion. I hope we get a decent report, and that could be decent for us as well. And then once PPI comes out, for those who don't know, it's the producer price index. It's very similar to CPI, except on the producer side. It's also a forward-looking indicator for CPI. Secondly, at 10 a.m., we have the Michigan Consumer Sentiment Report. This also has caused some volatility in the last couple of weeks for the market. So we'll see if there's a big move at 10 a.m., depending on what this looks like. Those are the two main pieces of data coming out for tomorrow. So look for volatility before market open at 8:30 a.m. and then 10 o'clock a.m. The PPI report should be decent, in my opinion, since we got a nice CPI. So I think it's going to be fine. And that could once again be decent for the markets. However, another major factor is going to be the big bank earnings. So tomorrow we have JP Morgan Chase, BlackRock, Wells Fargo, and Morgan Stanley all announcing earnings. If the majority of these banks do really well and we see a big pump, this could be a little bit more bullish for the markets to help sentiment to some extent. Because right now the market's still extremely fearful. We're not really free of fear yet. But if we get bad earnings, this could also be bearish for the market. So it depends on how these big banks do. I think that for the first quarter, if they give us decent guidance, that's going to be the most important thing that we're going to be listening for. And they may put out some comments involving President Trump's tariffs. So that could be very important as well. So it's not just about earnings, it's also about their guidances and what they tell us about the future and the current state of things. If these banks do really well, if we see BlackRock run to the upside, JP Morgan and Wells Fargo, if the majority of these banks do really well, that could actually help the market pump tomorrow. If they don't do too well, we could be looking for a rug pull. So please be very careful with the way in which things are looking. I'll keep you guys updated tomorrow about that. And last but not least, when you look at our data, tomorrow's April 11th, we have a little bit under 600,000 of these calls expiring and a little bit under 1.2 million puts expiring. We have a $530 max pain and a 1.98 puts to call ratio. So we'll just have to see what this looks like. So keep these levels in mind as time goes on. We'll see what this leads to. For now, there's actually a higher amount of puts expiring with 530 being max pain. So with that being said, let's talk about the market. How are things looking? So there is good news and bad news. The good news would be that we have this double bottom setup on SPY that could lead to a little bit more upside. And when we zoom out and go to the 4-hour time frame, we could see that we're actually looking a tiny bit more bullish because we formed a wick here and we're seeing buyers trying to defend. We also have a gap to fill up here, so that's a good sign as well. So the bulls have a slight edge because we did see them trying to hold support. SPY is technically above 525, which is decent. But the fact that we actually lost it temporarily before getting bought back up is also like not the best of pieces of news. So that's why we're kind of in the middle. So our setup looks like this, right? We have this support trend line. This is the blue trend line right here acting as support. We have this resistance right here. If you're a bear, just hypothetically, let's go over these levels. If you think the market's going to dump tomorrow, especially because it's a Friday, you want to see this lose this blue trend line firstly. If that fails us, we're going back down towards this low possibly. So if we end up losing like 520, which is where this happens to be, 518 to 520, then we're looking for a move back down towards 511. If we lose that, yes, this is going to be looking like an inverse cup and handle. We can start dumping back down right here. This is going to be our target near 500. That's where this imbalance is. So that's going to be your bearish case. If we get bad earnings from the banks and we get a bad PPI report, that could cause some downside. I also believe that the big bank earnings will be a little bit more impactful than PPI. So the big bank earnings will be huge. Will that cause a rug pull for the markets? If so, we're looking for a setup like this. If we're bullish after the big banks announce their earnings, you want to see us break this high up here at this 530 area. If we break that, I think we could start, kind of breaking this trend line, and then we're going to be targeting an attempt to get back up towards 535 or above. And then we also have a gap to fill. So if we break that, we're going to be going even higher to fill this gap for like 545. It all depends, guys, but there is upside potential in this if we're forming an accumulation and if we hold above our key levels. When you go to the daily, let me just call out that the daily Doesn't look that great, but if we manage to get back above like, the 540s, we could be trying to fill this gap around 555. We haven't filled that yet. So there's potential in this. But for the most part, the market's kind of indecisive approaching the big bank earnings. So that's the big factor affecting us. So I don't truly know what's going to happen. But if I were to take my, best assessment, my best presumption based off what we're seeing, we're holding our EMAs. So this does favor, it wants to push for like 535 tomorrow morning. And I don't know if we're going to get a rug pull or not after that, but this does look a little bit more bullish, a tiny bit more, since we're trying to make a higher low here. We're actually forming higher lows for the much shorter term. So see how we're forming a wick here and we're actually holding our EMAs. Looks a little bit more in favor of upside just temporarily. And we'll see if this leads to downside later on or not. But for now, there might be an upside move coming once we open as the most likely technical move. Now, keep in mind, technical analysis does work most of the time, but it's not always perfect because, President Trump can make a big announcements about his tariffs, or at any given moment, the banks might not do too well. So we can't truly predict that. So that's why you want to be open-minded to anything. But for now, the chart is favoring that we're going to try to push upon open as the most likely possibility, looking at this setup as we're trying to make a higher low here. We're trying to break this resistance. So look for an attempt to push tomorrow morning for like 530, if not 535, and we'll see if you reject or not. For now, that's the most likely case. The QQQ is basically doing the same thing. And basically, guys, let me just remind you all, the entire market ran yesterday. We were very green. Then the whole market sold off today. So the market's kind of like moving in unison. As you guys could tell, it's kind of moving in unison. So the same setup exists on the QQQ. Notice the QQQ is getting bought back up right now in the after hours. And then also, we held all of our 30-minute EMAs right here. So all the EMAs you see were actually above them. So that's a good sign so far. So just to be very clear, if we get bad earnings from the banks, if the banks do poorly and we lose this blue trend line here, okay, if we lose this like 440-ish area, which is where the trend line is going to be tomorrow morning, I could be looking for an attempt to dip back down towards 435, and we could be retesting this low. If that fails, then we dip to this imbalance, which takes us back down to like 422, also forming kind of like an inverse cup and handle like structure. Now, if we're bullish, if the bulls want to step in, and let's just say the big bank earnings are good, you want to see us essentially break past 450. If we could break that, we're looking for an attempt to get back up towards 458 to 460 as our target. This also resembles an accumulation, kind of. It's not as perfect looking. It's kind of like indecisive right now, but there is some potential for this. So looking at this, it does look like it wants to push a bit higher to at least 450 again. If not, back up to like 458. So it does look a little bit more bullish for the morning tomorrow. So we do favor upside as a stronger possibility. We'll see depending on the data, but that does look a bit more probable. Also, look at in the IWM. This ETF has been making higher lows. We bounced off this trend line. We're also kind of rejecting off of it as we got a rejection here. So if you're a bear, you want to see us essentially lose this wick right here at 179. If that fails us, we could be dipping back down to 177. So we could be looking for a rejection if that ends up coming back down. If we're bulls, if you want to see the bulls step in, we need to get back above 184. If that breaks, we're looking for an attempt to push for 187. So I'm watching these levels just to be safe. Now, looking at this, when you zoom in, okay, this looks like kind of like an inverse cup and like a bullish structure, maybe like an inverse head and shoulders, sort of. I wouldn't say like a cup and handle. I'd say more like an inverse head and shoulders. So it kind of looks like it's going to do something like this, like where it wants to get back up to like 184 to retest this 200 EMA. We'll see if it rejects off that or not. But it does look a little bit more bullish to me looking at this setup. Looking at ES, very similar setup, okay? So the good news is that we're making higher lows. This low is higher than this one, and we held 5150, the exact level I had marked right here. That's what I talked about as the support in case we lost 5200. But to be bullish, you want to break this trend line. We haven't quite done that yet, but we're trying to. So what's good is that we kind of like dipped like this. We made a higher low, and now we're trying to break out higher, so it's looking a little bit better. So in my opinion, if you're a bear, let's just say the banks don't do well. Let's say the banks have bad earnings. You're going to retest this trend line right here at 52.22. If that fails us, we could be tipping back down to 51.50 or below as a potential setup. This also looks like an inverse cup and handle, which does not look too good. So be careful. But the bullish case would be that we have this low here. We came up, made a higher low. Now we're trying to break out like this. If we break the resistance here, we're looking for the next resistance at 53.50. If that breaks, I could easily see us push for about 5,400. So what's looking more probable, in my opinion, is the bullish case. Like we have this low here, we can't have made a higher low, and we might get a temporary push for 5,400. Will we get a rejection off that or not? We'll see about that, but we do look like we might try to go a little bit higher, especially as we have lots of puts expiring tomorrow. The majority of positions are in puts. So maybe we're about to see a small push, especially as ES is trying to push right now. Same thing with NQ. So basically, we're indecisive, but we're making higher lows here. We're hitting this resistance. If it ends up rejecting, let's just start with the bearish case. If we lose 18,250, we're looking for a dip back down towards this low at 17,800. And if we end up breaking the resistance over here, so look at this resistance near 18,600 around there, which is where the trend line happens to be. If I could see this break, I'm going to be looking for an attempt for 18,700 plus for a temporary move up. Once again, keep in mind it's temporary. I don't know if the move will get a rejection after that or not, but for now, that's what I'm essentially looking for. For Bitcoin's looking a bit more bullish. As you guys can tell, it's trying to make higher lows. Also, what we could do is kind of draw out a trend line like this. So it's sort of like riding this up like this, which is decent for now, but we need confirmation first. So if you're a bear on Bitcoin, if you think the market's going to get a rug pull, you want to see Bitcoin essentially lose 78,000. If we lose that tomorrow, I do think it dumps back down like this. That's the more bearish case. But if you're a bull, you want to see it reclaim 80,345 tomorrow. That's going to be favoring a push for about 81,200 back up here if that's the case. So those are the bullish and bearish cases. My prediction is we kind of just ride this trend line up slowly grind up. I think that's more likely. And we try to push back up to this imbalance. We'll see just to be safe, but I find that to be a little bit more probable. For Tesla, okay, so if you look at Tesla, it's the same thing. We're bouncing, making higher lows. Then we have this resistance, which is where Tesla rejected, but now it's trying to break above that. So it's a good sign. Now, if we get a rug pull, okay, you're going to be looking for a move back down towards 248. If that fails us, we're looking for this like trend line area, the 248 to 246 area. If that fails, we're looking for a dump back down to 240 or below if we end up getting a rejection. If we're bullish, however, we have this low up here. We're going to be making a higher low, and we could be pushing even higher for essentially 255. If that breaks, I'm looking for an attempt to push for about 260. So what's more likely is that Tesla has this accumulation that's right over here, right? We made a higher low here, and we're actually trying to bounce back up, and we're actually trying to push a bit higher if we could hold above this area to push back up to 260. I find that to be a little bit more likely. So we'll see just to be safe, but that's what I am presuming is more likely looking at the setup. Nvidia has the same setup right now. It's trying to break out a little bit. Notice that we actually closed above 106, which is a good sign. It's a good sign we closed above that. So if you want to be a bear, you want to see us lose this trend line. If this fails tomorrow after big bank earnings come out, expect 104, then eventually back down to about 99. But if you're a bull, if you think the market's going to see a big push, we're going to be making higher lows here, and this could actually try to continue to break out. As long as we're above 107.78 tomorrow on Nvidia, we favor 110 again, if not above, especially as we have these imbalances taking us up higher, so that looks a bit more probable. Exact same setup on Apple. We're trying to make higher lows. Like I said before, if we see this thing dump, and if we end up losing 188, we could be dipping back down towards these lows at 184. If we are bulls, if you think the market's going to see a big pump tomorrow, you want to see essentially break 192. If that's the case, I think we easily go up higher for 193 plus to 195. And then I also want to call out that if we do break through 192, we have a gap to fill back up to 197. So there's some potential in this to form an inverse head and shoulders. We'll see just to be safe. Obviously, it depends on this data. Looking at Netflix, it looks a little bit like it's trying to make a higher low here. If we lose basically 904, do expect it to dump back down. If we continue to push, we're looking for 937 as our target. 937 looks a bit more probable, so it does look a little bit more bullish to me. For others out there, such as MSTR or MicroStrategy, we're in the middle, getting very tight. If we end up losing 262, we're looking for a dip back down towards 253. If we break past 276, we're looking for an attempt to push for the 280s. We're making higher lows here, so what I like is the fact that we have this trend line acting as a support. So as long as we hold this, we're going to continue to uptrend for basically 285 plus again. Celsius, same setup. We're kind of like in the middle. If we lose 36, we're looking for a dip, which could actually take us back down. And if it's the opposite, we're looking for some more upside. We're very stuck right now. We've been going kind of like back and forth for many, many weeks. So as you can see, it's just range bound. Might slowly push for 38, but then most likely it's just going to consolidate. Similar setup on Supermicro. So it all depends on this trend line right over here. Do we hold support or do we end up getting a rejection? We'll see about that. So as we're in the middle, we're looking to see if we can break 34. If that's the case, we're going to be going even higher for an attempt to push for 35 plus. If we end up losing 32, we could be dipping back down, but overall, there's some upside potential here. For Palantir, we have an inverse head and shoulders like pattern. If we lose 86 tomorrow, we could be dipping back down to about 84. And if those fail us, we dump. With the inverse head and shoulders, we're favoring that we want to go up to about 90 plus, maybe up to these highs again. So technically speaking, it's a little bit more bullish and it's favoring upside for tomorrow with the big bank earnings coming out. Rivian also has an inverse head and shoulders. If we end up losing 11.39, we're looking for a dump back down to 11 flat. If we continue to hold, we're looking for an attempt to fill the gap at 11.8. For SoFi, we have an inverse head and shoulders. So long as we don't lose 10.24, we're favoring upside. This is actually looking like it wants to go up to about 10.98 as a little bit of a stronger possibility. AMD needs to hold above 89.6. If that's the case, we're looking for an attempt to push for 93. Looks a bit more probable. ARM has an inverse head and shoulders. So if you end up losing 99, we're looking for a dip. As long as we're above that, we're looking for an attempt for 104. Coinbase looks decent. If we end up losing 165, we're going to be dumping back down. And as long as we're above that, we're favoring 175, then eventually the gap fill for 176.2. For Amazon, if we end up losing 180, this 178-ish area is where this like trend line happens to be. I do expect us to dump. As long as we're above 182, we're favoring a push for 184 plus as we're looking a bit more bullish. Meta's looking decent. We're making lower highs here, but if we end up losing support at 537, we're looking for a dump back down towards 520. If we end up breaking past 550 plus, we're looking for an attempt to push for 565. So it looks a bit more bullish. Microsoft is in the middle, getting very tight. If it loses 377 and 371, we're going to be dipping. But as long as we're above this support, we're looking for an attempt to push for 387, then the gap fill for 390. We look a bit more bullish to me. For Google, if we end up losing 153, we're looking for a dump back down towards 148. And as long as we're above 158, we're looking for an attempt to push for essentially the 160. So we do look a bit more bullish to me. For GameStop, we're making higher lows here. So if we lose 24.8, we could turn back down. As long as we hold these EMAs, we're looking for an attempt to push for 25.9. AMC is also going to be going for $3, in my opinion, for a small push. Nice double bottom here. It has some potential. DJT is very indecisive. It's pretty much just stuck. If we lose 18.5, we're going to be dumping tomorrow. If we break 19.18, we're looking for a bounce. We're in the middle, completely indecisive, so we're waiting to see what it does. The VIX is looking kind of weak. We're making lower highs here, so I think we might be dipping for 38.26 on the VIX. If that fails us, we could be dipping lower. We're at support around 40, so we'll see if it holds or not. But overall, I just want to say that the VIX is, it's been making lower highs. If you look at the last couple of hours, it's been kind of rejecting here. So I do anticipate a small dip to start things off, which does imply the market may push a bit, but we'll see if we get a bounce or not near 38 to about 35 in that range. So if we get a bounce there on the VIX, obviously that could cause a rug pull later, but for the time being, it's going to dip a bit. So I think the market pushes a little bit. Maybe we'll see what happens once we get our data, but that's what I'm basically seeing. The 10-year is going up a bit, not the best for what I would say the Trump administration wants. We'll see if they end up changing their stance on things to bring yields down. The dollar is also kind of flat here, dipping a little bit, so it's not really affecting things. So what is my view of the market? We're actually looking a little bit more in favor of bulls. The bullish case looks like we're going to likely try to push during the morning period just to start things off tomorrow morning when we open. But of course, it depends on our inflationary numbers. It also depends on how the big bank earnings do, which I can't truly promise or predict anything about. So it depends on those things. For now, technical suggests more upsides coming, so we might try to push a bit higher, and we'll see if we get a rug pull or not later on. But for now, that's what I'm seeing as the most likely possibility heading into tomorrow for a temporary push. Thank you for listening. Please have a good rest of your day. And I'll be back tomorrow morning before market open for another update. Until then, have a good one and peace out.